He's been described as captivating, refreshing, and witty. Well, today we're hoping to get a glimpse of all three. Very special episode on Hoops Unknown as we welcome Kevin Owens to the podcast. Kevin enjoyed a high-level 10-year professional career in markets such as the NBL in Australia, the KBL in Korea, and as well even in the NBA G League. To top it off, he wrote a book about all of those experiences and more. Nowadays, Kevin helps pro players transition into their post-athletic careers. Thanks so much for joining us, Kevin. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thank you so much for having me, Jose. Well, I love what we're doing, building the overseas game and working together to try to, build this up, make sure that people know what's going on and keep our voices strong.
Amazing. Well, first thing I want to know is that you retired in 2012, but you've still been involved in the game through you helping players transition to their post-athletic careers. So I'm wondering, what have you seen today in overseas basketball that may be different from when you retired in 2012?
Now there's so many opportunities. There's more leagues, there's more teams, and that then creates more competition and more guys trying to get overseas. And because there's more eyes on it, more guys who probably wouldn't have tried to play overseas before because it would have been they didn't have an agent, etc. Now you have more guys who have the opportunity to be like, hey, I'm going to try this. I'm going to try to make it overseas. And there's guys like you who are able to figure out ways to get players to chase their dream and to continue chasing their dream. So I think there's more competition. It's definitely tougher to get in overseas now. You can get in at smaller levels, but it's harder when there's just so many more athletes fighting for those limited number of spots. So the more eyes has been great, but it's also created such a big frenzied competition for guys trying to get overseas and try to be successful there.
Right. And on that topic, so not only did you get overseas, but you played in huge markets like the NBL, where players like LaMelo Ball are played in previously before they went to the NBA, the KBL, where there's very high level imports there, some players making over $1 million nowadays. So when you look back at it and you see the imports or the foreigners, because that is what you played as throughout your career, is just a pure import, a pure foreigner, the toughest road to overseas basketball. Is there anything in terms of traits that you thought that you shared that made you successful?
I think overseas, when you talk about being successful, there's no time for like the BS. There's no time for nonsense. I think with the talent that the NBA has, like we almost coddle our athletes and they mess up, but they're so talented that it's like, okay, well, we'll let this slide or we'll let this go and you'll be suspended, but you're coming back. Overseas, there's just no time for it. So those traits that I had that made me successful, obviously, I had a good work ethic. I was able to, do the things I needed to do on the court, but off the court, I was also trying to be the best version of a teammate, best version of an employee that I could be. I wasn't causing trouble. I wasn't, going and smoking weed and things like that. Like I was just going and I had a job to do and I put myself into that position to be the best version of myself as a basketball player. But going overseas, I think it's tough because the nonsense that you might be able to get away with here, they just will release you. Like they don't have time for your nonsense. So it's just like, you're good. If you mess up, you're out. And they talk. So it's not like a 3-strike you're out. If you are labeled as a problem, that's going to be a huge issue going forward. And it could stunt your career just because you are expecting people to just bow down to you. Overseas, they don't do that. It's like you come, you produce, you be a responsible, you be a professional, and you will get paid. You don't, you'll be home, and there's nothing that you can do about it. And I think that was the big reason that why I was successful. I mean, my talent level compared to other guys who probably were more talented than me, I just outworked them, and I was just a better role model. I was a better professional off the court, and I think that's what set me apart and was allowed me to get into these opportunities and play, a decent amount of time playing professionally.
Yeah, I think that's an amazing point because a lot of times when they think of overseas basketball, they think that talent alone will be enough to kind of get them through their career. But the thing is, when these teams are investing so much time and so much resources into you, so they have to pay not just your salary, they have to pay for your flight, your food, your accommodations. Maybe you bring your wife or your kids or someone there at those levels. That's a lot of money for them to take on an unknown commodity. So that's exactly what, to your point, is what you're saying. If you're dependable, reliable, all of these things that quote unquote like aren't sexy for a player to have, that's really going to help you in your career. So I feel like that's something that's really lost on a lot of players today.
100%. And you talk about like the investment, like you said, that they're putting in. Now, overseas, this is another difference between then and now. There was a lot of relying on people's word back then. And, a coach from America would be like, listen, this guy can play in your league. Your agent was reputable, and they'd be like, this guy can play. Get him over here, give him a shot. That shot is expensive for the team. So if and like there's so much unknown now, there's more film, so they kind of are able to see your film and be like, okay, they can help us, they can do this. Back then it was you had a little film, you had a little bit of a reputation, but it was more like it was other people's word to get you overseas. And now there's so much information that you can find on it. You can look at their social media account, you can look at their film, they can look and see, are they the fit that we need? And some guys won't even get a shot because of their, what they post, what they're looking at. I mean, it's just like any other job. We talk about this a lot. You're an employee. So you're an employee of, like, just like if you're a multi-billion dollar hedge fund who's trying to hire, a good, solid employee, they're going to check you out. They're going to vet you. And overseas teams will vet you as well. So I think that is a huge thing when you talk about, that level of professionalism that you need to be successful.
Right. As I always say, it is professional basketball, operative word being professional at the start of the title. So you do have to come with some professionalism in yourself, and it's not just all about the court. I want to read a little excerpt here. So this is from Kevin's book, Overseas Famous. So eventually, Kevin, you hit a crossroads in your career when you were in the G League, and then you had to basically determine for yourself or decide for yourself if you're going to keep on going for the G League, keep on going for the NBA dream, or go overseas. So in one of the pages on page 43, you said, indulge me if you will. Imagine being an NBA rookie. You are told how amazing you are throughout your life. You are a superstar at a high-end Division I university where you're given everything you need before declaring for the draft. And then you go on to say, eventually you practice in an elementary school gym, which are used for PTA meetings the night before. So this is kind of like the other side of overseas basketball. So there's the high-end markets such as Korea and Australia where you played in, but then there's also this side where when you were starting out in the G League, you weren't making a lot of money. You were really struggling to get by, and you're very open about that in your book. So I'm wondering, what eventually made you turn and be like, yo, I've got to start making money? There was eventually like that point in your career, and what kind of like turned your opinion on that?
That was just crazy to me. I'm like, you just were playing in front of NBA scouts. You're like, working out for NBA teams, and then you come home and you're living in the attic of your mom's house, and it's like, what in the world? It just became like I always said you had the label, you just didn't have the extras. So the label was great, and people were like, you're doing great work and this and that. But then I was making $12,000 a year, and that's like before taxes. So I was really making not much money. And you're just kind of like, it was great. And my insurance, I had great MBA insurance. I was able to do things, but there was just no money. And I was just like, I need something else. I was close, and I went to Poland, and that the money dried up there. I was like, that was the question I asked. I was like, maybe this isn't the thing. Like maybe there isn't any money in basketball unless you're in the NBA. But then I would hear stories like my brother went to France and he was playing and he was making, $5 a month. And he was just like, yeah, he was in Pro B and Malus. And he was just like, yeah, you can play here. Like you can 100% play here. And I went over to France and played at his practice and like dominated the practice. And I'm like, so I was able to finally start making money. And that's when I was like, all right, this is good. Like we're in
Right.
a good spot right now. But those first few years were tough. I mean, it's great. I always say, like, I would go to the bar and my friends are like, hey, buy a round. And I'm like, dude, you make twice as much as I do. And you're like at an entry level crap job somewhere. I'm like, what do you mean? You buy me around. I'm like, I'm not like a baller status right now. It's
Right.
just the label. That's all I had. I just had the label.
Did you ever feel ashamed in those like opening kind of years, almost like you were a fraud playing?
It was like and it was cool. It was good because I do believe that when I was going through the G League, I was like, this competition is ridiculous. And I'm looking and I'm seeing NBA players and I'm like, this is like, I'm playing against these guys and I'm playing against guys. There's guys on my team who played at Duke and all these big time universities. I'm like kicking their ass every day of practice. I'm like, well, I'm good enough. Like something's there. So, but yeah, that lack of money
Mm.
it killed you. It just, because at the same time you're just trying to move on with your life. The good thing was, like you experienced, when you're young and you're in your early 20s, not for nothing, but you don't have any responsibilities. Like you can just go, you can do what you want to do. So in those early 20s, I was just like, screw it. Like I'm just gonna go play. I'm gonna keep this dream alive. I'm gonna keep going because eventually it will work. And if it doesn't, then I move on. But I'm going to give it everything I got, and I'm going to try. So those times in between the G League and getting that first contract overseas, they were tough because I was like, I don't know if I'm doing this anymore. Like I can't just sit here and not make money.
Yeah, it definitely takes, especially when you're starting out. Like there's a lot of players who never reach the level. I'd say the vast majority of them will never reach the level that you reached of six-figure contracts, over 20,000 a month, stuff like that. So it takes a seriously like mentally strong person and someone who really loves the game in order to grind it out at those levels, especially when you're making, like you said, 12,000 a year. I was in a very similar position, except I never actually reached past nowhere near 20,000. My highest I think was 4 or 5,000. But even then, like when you're starting out, everyone's saying, "Oh, they're so proud of you. You're a professional player." But it's like, dude, I'm making like less than a Burger King worker, $700 a month, and but like no one sees that aspect of it. So I say all that to say you can't let outside opinion like influence you
Yeah.
to a certain extent, because if you do, that will eat you up. If you let your parents, what they think, if you let what your friends say about, oh, you should play here, or you're not even making this, or why don't you play in that league, like that stuff will eat you up if you let it get to you.
Yeah. My brother, he kind of stopped early and he was good, and was in Mulhouse, France, had a good situation. He was one of those weird situations where he played for the same team for multiple years because they were successful. He was doing his job and he just would come home and then go back to Mulhouse for a few years. So he had a good situation, but he was presented with, I guess, my sister-in-law's parents kind of sat him down and they're like, are you just going to do this the rest of your life? Like he got that talk
Oh,
like, hey, you're making five a month, but like you could be making more. Are you going to continue doing this? Like, where's the future for our daughter? And I was like, oh shit, like it's pretty intense. I never had that. So everyone in my life was way more supportive and way more understanding that I had this talent and I was going to earn it. My brother had it too, but sometimes those outside forces lay in and loves a crazy thing. I was like, listen, like I love this game and I love myself. Those are my two things that I really was focused on at that point in my life. So I was more worried about trying to make it and as far as I could and not worry about someone else's happiness.
Right. Yeah. So then, okay, so you're in the G League, you're making 12 grand a year. Then eventually it clicks and you say, hey, I got to start making real money. You start making real money, but obviously you can't play basketball forever. So how did you set anything aside for your post career life?
So I was connected with my agent through like a financial friend of mine who I still work with, and he was able to take some of that money and put it into different investments, things like that. And I had, because at that point, the one thing that I was told not to do, and like my parents were big on this, where they're like, don't just piss away your money, dude. Like, so I was like, all right, I'm going to take this amount. I'm buying a house. I'm going to put a, large down payment on a nice house in a nice neighborhood where I'm going to grow old. And then I was able to put some in investments and things like that. But I wasn't that glitzy guy just going around spending money. I never was that. And I think as like those years in the G League almost prepared me for that. It would have been tough. And I think it's tough for young players now. A young guy who's 20 years old is coming out and you got, millions and millions. It's tough to sit there and listen to an adult be like, here's what you need to do and here's what you need to be thinking about. It's tough because you're just like, okay, well, I have this and you don't. Um, so that was those years of struggling in the G League prepared me for that because I knew, and like growing up, like we weren't wealthy, we were, lower middle class, and we didn't have much. So I think those times growing up where I knew what poor was like, I knew in the G League what poor was like. So by knowing what poor is like, I knew that I never wanted to be there again. So I was able to invest things wisely, where I could have a comfortable transition, but still, nothing really prepared me for the transition that I experienced, where you think you're on top of the world, and although I had money set aside, it's still you think that the world is just going to open up to you because your ego has been formulated throughout your entire career that you are the absolute best, like you are the shit, and suddenly people, like I always say, like the biggest experience I had, the overseas famous, the reason the name came was I was in Estonia, everyone's kissing my butt, walk out, and I think I said this in the podcast, like walked out and gave someone my shirt, and I walk home and like someone's in the Philadelphia airport like, you should play for the Sixers. And I'm like, how in the world did I get here? Like, I should play for the, like, that's been my dream my whole life. Thanks for the update. But it's like, you have no idea who I am. Like, you have no idea. And I just had people cheering my name, and now I'm here. And I'm like, that was that first recognition. Like, this isn't going to be easy because people don't know who I am. Now with social media, it's a little easier. But man, those are some days of really humbling myself for a few years to figure out, like, hey, you're just at the bottom of the barrel now, just like everyone else.
Right. So for those of you who don't know, Kevin now helps athletes transition to their post-athletic careers. So that kind of segues perfectly into it. What are some ways, if you could redo it, I guess, and go back in time, what are some good ways for athletes to actually look to set themselves up after they're done playing? Because you did a perfect, like your story is so perfect because like you made a decent amount of money and then you put it aside and now it's like passively setting you up for your life after playing. And I always say this, like you can play 5, 6 or 10 years in your case professionally, but those 10 years when you were playing, like it's like your earning potential's on steroids during those 10 years because they're paying for all the accommodations, they're paying for your food. So you're literally bankrolling everything and you don't have to spend it on anything. So realistically, even if you're like a mid-tier player, you could come home with 50, 60,000 saved in your bank account after 1 year overseas. And then you do that, you just do the math. You do that for 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 years, you're going to have $250,000 or even more left when you're done playing. So I guess what would be some ways that you would recommend for athletes to kind of try to set themselves up so that they're making the most out of their overseas experience?
Yeah, 100%. So the first thing, yes, you need to understand that, and I'm not a financial advisor, but I've worked with enough to know that, if you can take that money that you're making and make it earn without you touching it, without you doing anything, if you could just sacrifice those ridiculous purchases that you want to make and just let that money earn and start investing it into the things where it's going to give you money back, where you're not all of a sudden you're just like, oh, I made, $100,000 this year and I didn't do anything. I didn't touch anything. It's just my money is making money on this investment and this investment. Those are the wise things. And, understanding that first and foremost as a player to make your money earn for you. The next thing is just is just I mean, we talk all the time with what I'm doing with Focus is your identity is really the hardest thing, because if you can take that money and you can have it earned, that's great. But like, you as a human being are going to go through a transition that you've never experienced before in terms of like who you are. You have no idea who you are. That's what I really struggled with, is like, okay, I'm Kevin Owens, the basketball player. And then all of a sudden, now I'm Kevin Owens, what am I? Like, Kevin Owens, the what? Like, what are you going to be next? And everyone goes into what they know, which is, training and coaching and things like that. But understanding your identity early to figure out, like you always talk about, what are your side hustles? Like, what are you going to do? So figuring out early what it is that's going to make you tick outside of this game. Like, what is it that's going to make you successful outside of this game? And what is it that you love to do outside of this game? And if you can answer those questions and start putting together your mentality and, what your drive is, and all these like 6 different themes that that make you a hireable athlete, and you start thinking about them when you're playing, you're going to be in a good situation when you retire, because you'll have an idea of who you are outside of this game. And that's the toughest thing, because when it just ends and that ball stops, you've heard, I mean, how many articles have we read? How many podcasts are there about athletes and their struggles outside? Because when that ball stops and you're just another dude or another girl, like, what you don't know who you are, and your mind is going to struggle. And that's what I went through, and that's what I was not prepared. I was prepared financially. I wasn't prepared mentally for the ego hits, for the just the identity crisis. Those were things that were real, and I think a lot of athletes go through that, and that's what we try to do while athletes are still playing, to prepare them for those different stages.
Yeah, it's really interesting because a lot of people, they have this mindset of, well, the highest performers in the world, they don't have plan Bs. But when you actually look at it, that's not entirely true, because you'll look at even someone like Kobe. He was even getting into, I think it was like children animations during the latter part of his career, because he understood that, the ball's not going to bounce forever, and he was nearing closer and closer to retirement. Look at LeBron. You look at all of these different guys, even though they're the highest in the profession, they still have side hustles. LeBron still does brand sponsorships. He still has his shoe line. He still does all these different things. So it seems to me, it doesn't make sense that even at the lower level, you're not making the money of a LeBron. You're not making the money of a Kobe. So it would make even more sense to me that you need this side hustle. You need something outside of basketball to kind of help you along the way. That's how I view it, at least.
100%. And that's figuring out that side hustle is the biggest part, because we're not LeBron, we're not Kobe. So we don't have someone with a wealth. I mean, you have these guys will get linked up with, these top level athletes, like these huge venture capitalists, these huge successful businessmen and businesswomen who have all this experience and all these connections. So they're just kind of walk in and be like, hey, LeBron, here's what you can do. This will be this. And it's like, it's handled. It's not like LeBron's walking out and being like, let's see what I should, like walking into Warner Brothers and being like, hey, I have an idea. It's like all his people are working for him. Overseas, we don't have that. Like, we don't have the opportunity to have a business person just come up and be like, hey, I think I can double your earning in impact, or like double your earning potential. It's just not there, because there's just no one's approaching us, because they don't look at our value as the value of a John Morant or a LeBron James, or, these guys who are making millions, because they're a face. When we don't have a face, you have to figure it out outside of the box, and you can't just rely on someone walking up to you and being like, here's show me why you provide value and I'll give you $1 million. Like, it's taken a long time, it takes a long time to show that you are still valuable, that you can provide value to people who have a lot of money when you don't have a name. And that's the toughest part. And that's what you have to figure out early in your career, to figure out those side hustles so that you can be successful. And someone is willing to walk up to you and be like, hey, I'll give you a ton of money because you provide value to me. And that's what we have to understand, that we have to provide a value outside of basketball.
So looking back at it, so we talked about the side hustles, we talked about investing. Looking back at it, what would be maybe the single biggest piece of advice that you would give a player looking to play overseas? Would it be just that, try to set yourself up for post basketball, or what do you think?
I think your social media is going to play a huge part in your success. If you can generate impressive content and you could just show, like, some of these athletes who show their daily life is incredible. It's great content. People see it, people follow, people start looking at you. You're seeing what you're showing a docuseries on your social media account of your life, which is incredible. I mean, look at docuseries like the Jason Kelsey. It's like these people are through the roof in terms of their popularity because they know how to promote themselves using their own words, using their own abilities on social media. So I think having a strong social media following, having a strong social media presence where you're showing and being honest about everything that goes on, being honest about, what you're making. And it's tough because I was always honest. Like, I was like, I'm not making shit. Like, it was like, that was my whole entire point, was like, wasn't sitting there acting like people needed to know that I was like this big rich person. I was driving around in like a beat up pickup truck and I was playing in the G League. And it's just like, people don't really understand that. But I would say social media, and like we just talked about, like having the ability to figure out life outside of basketball, because I'm like huge on balance. My entire life is a balance. Like, I'm reading all these things and it's just like, work 24 hours a day. And it's like that's ridiculous. Like, who does like these motivational things? Like, Kobe Bryant worked out 24 hours a day. I was like, no, he didn't. First off, second off, he also balanced his life outside of basketball. You have to have a balance. And I think this world is all, everyone's saying you have to do 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and that's the only way to be successful. There's other way. You grind it out. You work your butt off during those opportunities, during those times. You have to have a balance. You have to have an ability to balance life, basketball, finances, everything. And if you don't have that balance, it's going to be tough. Like, I talk about my diet now. I'm like, I try to eat healthy. I try to work out. I try to do things. I was having a conversation with my friends last night. It's just like, some people just don't, they just blow up after high school, after college, and they just become like, bigger, and they're not working on themselves anymore because they don't have that balance. They're like, well, I have this much, but like I always say, you got to take some time for you. You got to take some time for your kids, and you got to take some time for your actual mind, and what your success is. And if you can balance your life like that, that's wildly popular. That's what's going to get you far. Otherwise, you're going to get burned out. But being able to kind of like have the identity, have the understanding of who you are and how you can, achieve that is really the biggest thing. So, build up your social media, and just, you got to figure out your mind. You got to figure out what makes you tick. You got to figure out what makes you happy. And if you could do that, you're going to have a long, prosperous life. Knock on wood.
Definitely. So balance, basketball, life. Thanks so much for joining. I love speaking with kind of athlete entrepreneurs, because I'm really big on that, because I don't believe in that, the philosophy of like you're just all in as an athlete and like to completely compromise the other parts of your life, because I think it's all encompassing. I think it all connects together. And if you're more well-rounded in a way, you're going to be a better basketball player as well, because you're going to be a better communicator. You're going to be able to think through situations differently than other people, and you're going to be able to relieve some of the stress that you have as well, and that you're not just solely focused on that. So, it's really nice talking to you about it, and I really appreciate it. Here's the book, Overseas Famous, from Kevin Owens. He also has merch, right? You have merch on your store, is that right?
Oh yeah, there it is.
Here it is.
Yep, the Overseas Famous brand. I think it's like, I started it because I was just like, when Overseas Famous, I was like, that's catchy. And then I'm just like, I feel like overseas athletes, that's funny. Like, and now I have friends who are from, Philippines. He's a good friend of mine. He wears it all the time. And people are like, whoa, where did you get that? I'm like, man, we can market not just to athletes. We can market to people and just be like, hey, I'm a big deal in the Philippines. So it's good. It's a fun little play on words.
Definitely. I've been wearing it from time to time, and I always get a few comments from people asking what's that about and everything. So I just give them the whole spiel. Thanks so much for joining, Kevin. Is there anywhere that people can connect with you or where they can reach you?
Yeah, so Overseas Famous on Twitter, Overseas Famous on Instagram. Those are my two big ones. Follow Focused Sports. That one's everything links together because Focused has a K in it instead of a C, but the K stands for like that Kairos, that time outside of the Chronos that works. But that's a whole other topic. But yeah, you can follow me over. Just type in Overseas Famous, and all my stuff will come up, and you'll be able to find me and check it out.
And of course, read the book. It's available on Amazon if you are interested. Amazon Canada, Amazon USA. Thanks so much, Kevin. Appreciate it, and take care.
You too. Thank you, Jose.